You're now completing the second month of the rainy season retreat, as mentioned. Little more than 1 month left, so excellent and urgent opportunity to crank up our practice. The foundation for progress in the Dhamma is generosity and virtue. Generosity and other acts of kindness is building up the store of punya, the accumulation of good karma in our heart, and that manifests as a joyful, bright, radiant heart, a bright and a happy mind. And keeping sila, observing the precepts, is preventing us from hurting or harming ourselves and others, which is bad karma. So we have to combine that. If we make lots of good karma, but we also make lots of bad karma, we're not really getting anywhere. It's like saving your money, working hard to putting the money in the bank, and then just wasting it all in the casino and gambling or something. So similar, if we make good karma but we don't keep precepts, we are accumulating good karma, and at the same time we are cancelling it out with bad karma. But both together, this is powerful. Keeping the sila very pure, that means we are not making any major bad karma, and accumulating punya, good karma, generosity, kindness, compassion, acting on these motivations. But this is a vasa, guys, and we should go beyond practicing sila and dana, beyond practicing generosity, kindness, and precepts. We should develop a bhavana, a meditation, developing both samatha and vipassana, both calmness and insight, developing both samadhi, the internal blissful unification of mind, sometimes called concentration. Concentration is the standard translation for samadhi, but it has its limitations. Concentration, it sounds like an intense effort, whereas the full samadhi is actually a very relaxed, peaceful state. But we don't have a really ideal word in English. This peaceful unification of the mind on a suitable meditation object. We have to practice that, and then pañca, wisdom, investigation. Investigating the nature of reality, and that's all we have to do. Just seeing what the world, externally, internally, our feelings, emotions, our body, material phenomena, other people, investigating and seeing, observing how they're all, depending on conditions, how they're all impermanent, because anything that is coming to be due to causes and conditions will end and cease and fall apart once these conditions are exhausted. And in order to practice bhavana, a major part of practicing bhavana meditation is simply overcoming the 5 hindrances. Have you all heard of the 5 hindrances? Pañca Nīvaraṇā, Pañca. These are the 5 obstructions that weaken our wisdom faculty. These are the 5 things that stop our mind from unifying in Samadhi. Yeah?
What are the words in English?
The 5 hindrances, the 5 obstructions.
Yeah, and then what were the translations
I get into that. I'm just introducing them, and then as a group now, and then I will introduce each one personally to you. But first starting with them as a group, because often people have this perception that meditation is something very technical. Focusing on your nose tip and watching the breath and trying not to sustain the attention, repeating Buddha, that's not wrong at all. It's not wrong, but this is not the complete picture. And if these 5 hindrances are strong, you will find you cannot continuously for a long time settle your mind on a meditation object. Because this is what pulls the mind away from the meditation and out into the world. And a major part of our practice, both in a formal session, right here and now, present moment, but also more in a long-term perspective, is weakening these 5 hindrances. See, I try to make it exciting before I give the names. Just like when they have a show and they're introducing someone, when they talk about them, you don't know who it is, but they describe what is so unique and famous about them, and then when they come in. Of course, these are not the good guys. No? Be aware, these are not the good guys. So what are these 5? Number 1, sensual desire, kāmacchanda. Interestingly, this is number 1. Number 2 is ill will. You could also call it anger, grumpiness, hatred, rage, and so on. But fascinating, the Buddha gave actually sensual desire as the first. And if you look at the problems we have, whether it's wars and conflict between different countries, whether it's conflict between human beings, individuals, whether it's conflict in the family, usually it's not only anger, but it's also that one wants something. And usually other people also want something, and sometimes they want the same. And only one person can have it. And this is already the very root of conflict. There's a limitation of sensual objects and the sensual indulgence you can have. And they don't go around in the same amount for everyone. And this already sets us up for getting into conflict, into the problems with others. Because we cannot just have it all. If we didn't have this desire, it would be very easy to live in peace and harmony. So sensual desire, second, ill will, aversion, anger. Number 3, thīna-middha in Pali, often translated as sloth and torpor. It's not really everyday language. No? When someone asks you, oh, don't you like, let's go a little bit running, and you say, I just have so much sloth and torpor that I don't feel like it. No, you could call it laziness. You could call it sluggishness of mind, a lack of motivation. You could call it a lack of energy. Sitting on the couch, watching the telly, vegging out, taking it easy, laziness, tiredness. However, when we say tiredness, there's also physical tiredness, and we need to sleep. And it's not easy to distinguish these two things. Now, what is actually the defilement of laziness and tiredness, and what is actually really laziness, and what is a physical need to sleep. Number 4 is restlessness and regret, agitation from remorse, uddhacca-kukkucca. Could also call it doubt, but doubt is mostly the last one. Vicikicchā, the doubt, uncertainty, not sure, vacillating, procrastinating, not being able to come to a clear decision, wondering, doubting. So these are the 5. You wanted them, you got them now. Sensual desire, evil, anger, laziness, sluggishness, tiredness, restlessness and remorse, and number 5, doubt. And when these are strong, you will find that whatever technique you use in your meditation, however hard you try, the mind just can't settle down. When these 5 are very weak, this is the people who can get Samadhi easily. It's not like why these are the lucky guys, they can just sit with a blissful mind for hours, and I have to struggle and I try so hard, and it's unfair. It's not unfair, it depends simply how much people have already weakened these 5 hindrances, even in past life. So the task is to weaken them, to file away, to bring them down while we are sitting meditation, but also generally in our daily life, because that goes together. You try to get rid of these 5 while you're sitting meditation, and then for the other 90% of your life, you are actually strengthening them. That will not really lead anywhere. So we have to be careful in weakening them. And you're already weakening them by the foundation of the practice of punya, of generosity and kindness, and keeping the precepts. Keeping the precepts, for example, and it puts already a limitation how far you go with sensual desire. And if you fall in love with someone, but they are married, okay, so out. You don't go in that area. Now this is already in a clear restraint. Or you want something and you can't afford it, you can't get it by legal means. So then we have to just be able to go without it. So precepts is already putting some limitations, or anger. At least even if we are angry at the Mozi for taking our blood and causing us this itchy little pimple there, we wouldn't go as far as killing, hurting, harming. So this is already putting a limitation. But that is only the more coarse manifestations. And once we move to bhavana, to meditation, to samadhi and vipassana, we have to remove the more subtle manifestations. So what are the techniques? How can we abandon sensual desire? Contemplation? Contemplation of the physical body, exactly. Because a lot of our desire are bound up with the physical body, in particular the sensual desire, and with the perception of seeing the body as attractive. Just this morning I had to look again on some YouTube videos. Unfortunately, they put so many of these nice surgery videos, almost all now on over 18, so you have to log in, and I usually watch YouTube just in the browser without logging in. But anyway, if you're over 18 and you're logged in, you can see them. And some are still visible. And this is an excellent way of looking what the body is really like. Tummy tuck, open heart surgery, dental surgeries, opening the brain, facelift. One of my favorite is actually facelift. Have you ever seen a facelift operation? I really recommend looking at that. I'm amazed that people actually still do a facelift after seeing that. Now, they put that out as a kind of advertisement, many of the doctors. This is a very simple thing in principle. You just cut that open here, usually skillfully just in the hairline, that it's not so visible, the scar later. And then you have to go under the skin. And then there's like a little vacuum device. It can suck out quite a bit of the fat, removing some of the fatness. So they come in, go under the skin, peel that off, and then they're slurping out some fat there and smashing that in. This is really great to watch. And then the basic idea of the facelift is that you have the skin loose, and then you just pull. And then it will overlap here, so you cut the overlap off. It's very simple, like when you pack a little parcel, and then you make it tighter. You have to pull it, cut the overlap off, and then sew it back on. That's the whole idea. But it looks quite fascinating. And even if it's a pretty attractive young woman, once a doctor has peeled off the skin and holds it up, and then there's no attractiveness left. In fact, even a nose job, there's also many nose job videos. Even that, a very attractive person, once they open the nose, and you have gotten the cartilage and the bone and the blood, then he has this little chisel. Maybe person has a little bump. It's because it's just like in the workshop, a bit more subtle. It's got a little chisel and hammer, and then just smashing the bone in, adjusting it. So this is a great one for overcoming central desire to human bodies, contemplating the true nature of the body. I mean, even just the beginning of these surgeries, when they make the incision, I always find that intriguing. Wherever the body you cut a little bit, you immediately have the blood. And I find it quite, how to say, it destroys the beauty very effectively for me. The moment you have a cut and blood is coming out, it has a strong emotional reaction. And usually an essential desire will go away. Are there other ways? For example, you may have a habit of eating too many sweets. That's also a form of central desire, isn't it? And some people find it very hard not to eat all the candies. And so the problem is obviously not the sweets. The problem is our desire to eat sweets. And how do we overcome that desire? Yeah, sense restraint is always good. Now, for example, you don't have the sweets standing around. It's much more difficult if you have little boxes of sweets distributed throughout your home. It will be very hard not to eat them. But if you don't see these things, you don't talk about it, it's already helping, sense restraint. But the Buddha asked us, in general, is a very important template for practice. We have to contemplate the gratification. We have to contemplate the drawback, the danger, the other side of the medal, so to speak. And then the escape. The escape is letting go. The gratification of eating sweets, I think you know, or do I have to explain that to anyone? It tastes nice. But what is the danger? When you go to the doctor, does a blood check, diabetes. Would you want to have diabetes? And you can trigger that by eating too much sugar. Or do you occasionally go to the dentist? Do you ever have a root canal? Do you enjoy your root canals? Is it fun? No. So what you do is contemplating the danger, and when you see the little sweet, you should immediately hear the drill of the dentist, because this is where the tooth decay comes from, foremost, from eating too much sugar. And if you have a very clear picture in your mind, when you see the sweet, the picture comes up immediately. of the dentist chair, and the memory of the drill, or the little syringe, and then he gives you the injection for anesthesia. We had this Slovakian monk here many years ago. He stayed with us for a year. He later disrobed after he went back to Europe. But he really left a big impression with the dentist, one of the dentists, because he went for a checkup and they had to do 5 root canals. He didn't look after his teeth very well. I mean, it's not only eating sweet, brushing the teeth also helps. In any case, he had these 5 root canals, and he insisted on having them done without anesthesia. So he had 5 root canals without anesthesia. And he was a big hero. All the girls in that practice, they were totally blown away. These Buddhist monks, it's so amazing. Do you know why he didn't get anesthesia? Because he had a needle phobia. He was so afraid of getting the anesthesia injection, because that is the syringe with a needle. He was so afraid of that he rather took 5 root canals without anesthesia than getting this injection. Quite remarkable. Anyway, whatever is most unattractive for you, so you imagine the syringe, the injection, or you imagine getting diabetes. You may know people who suffer from that. And if you contemplate that ardhinava, that drawback, that danger, very intensely, then the desire for the sweets will just go away. Or if you're worried about maybe your weight, just imagine you climb onto the scales, 120 kilograms. So when you see the sweets or some other food you're really into, you should immediately see the image of the scales at 120 kilograms. And then the desire will fade away. This is an important pattern. The Buddha acknowledges there's also the asada, there is a gratification. The Buddha doesn't say that it's in all respects only painful to indulge in sensuality. Obviously, you can get a pleasant feeling from that. What the Buddha is saying is that the drawback is bigger. The danger outweighs the gratification. So we contemplate that. Next one, anger, grumpiness, ill will, aversion. We all know that one. Eh? So what is the way of overcoming that? Metta, that is the direct opposite of ill will, anger, aversion, loving kindness. May all beings be happy and well. May I live long, healthy and happily. May you live long, healthy and happily. May all beings be freed from anger. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings radiate loving kindness and do acts of compassion and kindness, building up that emotion, that intention. Exactly. Someone is bringing up another good contemplation, contemplation of death, maranussati, reminding ourselves, contemplating, thinking about the fact of our mortality and the mortality of all human beings. That one works also against sensuality. Death is very powerful. Imagine you're just struggling whether you should go to the fridge and get the ice cream, or whether you stay on your diet, and then that moment someone breaks into your home. Would you still be interested in the ice cream? You would be afraid that some gangster or robber and they may attack you. So contemplation of death is powerful against sensuality as well. But it can be used also for overcoming anger. And if you contemplate in a few years, and in the larger scale of things, even 100 years or a few years, both the person I'm so upset, myself, everyone else involved, they will be gone. In another 100 years, they will all be forgotten. No one can remember them even. And so why do I take that so seriously? And try to find the saving grace. Have you heard the term, saving grace? If you have a very difficult person where whenever you encounter them, you think about them, you notice this heat arising and the anger and resentment coming up. So it may not be easy to do metta to that person. For sure, and wishing them well, wishing them that they are filled with loving kindness, that they are happy and content and at ease. That is the easiest, the most effective way of overcoming anger to that person, but may be hard to do. So can we find something good in that person? So you see, for sensuality, you try to find what is bad about the candies and contemplate that. For overcoming anger, ill will, you have to find what is good in that person. If you can see the good qualities, then you will not feel so much anger, and it gets easier to bring up loving kindness. I once read this interview with Saddam Hussein's daughter. Not sure how many of you can remember in I think it was the second Gulf War, when they occupied Iraq and then defeated Saddam Hussein, who was the president. And then there was a period where he was just somehow gone, he was hiding. They later supposedly found him in this earth hole. But at that time, then no one knew where he is and what had happened to him. But because the propaganda was so strong with the war, and he was made out to be the worst person ever, and the worst than Hitler, and every news media outlet would always report about the atrocities he had committed and how utterly evil he is. I mean, he certainly was a very bad person, but they were completely focused on that. They didn't mind so much some other bad persons, all focus on him. But now someone did an interview with his daughter, and was really striking how different that was. Everyone would only emphasize this guy is the most evil person ever. But obviously for the daughter it was very different. She really loved him, and he may well have been quite a good father to her. She dearly missed him, and she was worried about him. No one worried about him. Everyone was just hoping to find him, to execute him. And she was worried that something bad may happen to him, and where is he? So obviously she could see many good things in someone who is obviously a very bad person. So can we see, the person you have problems with is probably much better than Saddam Hussein. And if the daughter of Saddam Hussein can find good things in him, you should be able to find something good in your problem person, isn't it? If we look closely enough, maybe find something good, and then we focus on that. Doesn't mean denying the bad qualities, but we're just not looking at them now. We're looking at the good qualities to bring up metta. Or if that is too difficult, then just pick a person or even an animal where you find it super easy. Someone really good, some animal really cute, and then you build up the metta there. And once the metta is really strong in your heart, then you can bring in that difficult person.
And if you realize that they are also suffering, then you can have some compassion towards them.
Exactly, that's another good one. If metta is too difficult, switch over to compassion. And for compassion, you have to see how much they suffer. And often you find people who hurt. They're hurting themselves, because if you're really, really happy, do you lash out at others? Usually not. So once, for example, you find someone really difficult, and then one day you hear that they have been diagnosed with advanced cancer, going through a really ugly divorce, and just lost their only child half a year earlier. Would you find it easier to deal with them? I would immediately find it much easier. And if they do something provocative or things that I really dislike, once I know they're in that situation, going through an ugly divorce, cancer, and lost their only child, I would immediately be much more forgiving. So once you can see the suffering in people, it's usually much, much easier. Still have 3 left. So, laziness. How do we overcome that? Tiredness. Energy and effort. The focus is actually fascinating how the Buddha describes it. And he says there is that element of energy, of exertion, of effort. And you have to focus on that. And once you focus on that in your own heart, the element of effort, exertion, energy, and it will grow and become stronger. The problem is when we feel tired and lazy, it doesn't seem to be there. But it's so important not to buy into this bluff. Because imagine you try to sit meditation in the evening and you feel, no, I'm really too tired. It's impossible, I have to sleep. This is a physical need to sleep. In that moment, you get a phone call and you get informed that you won the lottery. Really big prize, jackpot. Would you really go to sleep then, after that phone call? So where's the tiredness? Where's the tiredness? It was only in the mind. And the energy, you have to immediately figure that out and thinking what you're going to buy and going to do. The energy is actually there. You just can't see it. You have to identify it and bring it up. Or suddenly you get the phone call from that super cute person you always wanted to meet, and now they're calling you and try to arrange some date. Tiredness is gone. Completely gone. Or again, the burglar. The moment your life is in danger and someone comes in and points a gun at you, you wouldn't be tired. That shows that a lot of that stuff is only in the mind. We just have to learn to access that. Another thing the Buddha recommended is bright light. And people often make the mistake. This is not a romantic rendezvous, this is your meditation session. So don't make it too much candlelight and kind of half-dark space. If you're already in a really bright and you're maybe a bit restless, that can be helpful. But particularly at nighttime, I wouldn't recommend, don't make it so dark. Particularly if you have any issue with tiredness. Make it as bright as possible. Same in the morning. When your alarm clock goes, the best is actually if you have some automatic thing there and really bright light on. Not some 5-watt energy saving whatever, but really full blast. You may not like it because you want to continue sleeping, but it's very, very difficult to be sleepy under bright light. Going into the sun is really great. Moving the body into the sun, exposing some of our skin, not just the eyes, not the eyes. I don't mean looking directly in the sun, but getting that brightness. Very helpful. Yes?
Just wondering about
I totally agree. Now this is the next hindrance, restlessness and remorse. Now, it can be also called hyperactivity. And many people suffer from that. Now, they are workaholics, they are people kind of addicted to remain active, whether it's work, also hobbies, other activities. They're constantly keeping going. And there can also be external pressures. Obviously, the way the system works in a capitalist competitive market economy, you constantly try to increase productivity and you try to squeeze out more of people in terms of their effort at work. So there are quite a few people who are overworked. In that case, you need mindfulness to recognize that. And one way of checking that, if you have a few days off, which are really important, just sleep a lot. Because if you have a week holiday and you sleep really a lot for a couple of days, then one should recover. If the problem is a lack of sleep, then after some time you can catch up with that, and then you can notice you should become bright. But if you live like I sometimes lived as a student, and I'm already sleeping 10 hours at night, and I do that quite regularly, but then I still have another 2 hours nap in the afternoon, this is obviously not overworked. So we have to learn using mindfulness and wisdom to distinguish that. And with the tiredness, it can sometimes be tricky and not so easy. And we also tend to go into the extremes. You can notice that in your meditation, that sometimes you struggle with sleepiness, lazy, and then you try to overcome that, and then you become too restless. Or the other way around, you suffer from restlessness, hyperactivity, and then when you finally sit down, then the mind just goes blank out. And so they are kind of connected, and then you have to carefully assess that. Change of posture, exactly. And once you start nodding, not more of the same. Get up and walk. Very difficult to fall asleep walking. Not impossible. Not impossible, you can. I've managed to fall asleep standing, not walking. I know someone who managed walking. But it's much more difficult. So a walking meditation is really great. For low energy, it's also great for restlessness. Just walk really fast for 3 hours. And then I want to see that restlessness. You'll be happy to sit still. Yeah. Yeah, famous case. And so if you think, oh, I can't really meditate, I'm always nodding. There's a very famous nodder, the second chief disciple of the Buddha, and Mahamoggallana was struggling with nodding as well. And the Buddha came with psychic powers and encouraged him. Now, for example, changing the meditation object. That's actually the first one. Changing the posture. Putting cold water in your face. And he said, going out and looking at the constellations, because that's all they had. But nowadays I say, bright light, because we have electric light. Pulling the ears, yeah, you can try that as well. But using the modern technology we have and the bright light is really, really helpful. If you have internal light, it's even better, if you can imagine a bright light. And of course, for remorse, which is part of that restlessness, is put into the same thing there. And we need pure precepts. If you have a clear conscience, then you will not suffer so much from that form of restlessness, remorse, regret, compunction. And finally, doubt. Should I practice vipassana or samatha? Should I do anapanasati, or is not metta better? Or maybe body contemplation? When I practice anapanasati, should I just look at the nose or the falling of the abdomen? Mahasi or Paok? Or have you ever had that? Should I rather walk or sit? Or how long should I walk? Should I walk an hour? Should I meditate early morning or other? Once you go into that, it becomes endless. And do we really have the teaching of the Buddha? Maybe that is not really his teaching, and you start doubting there. Or can I do that? Maybe nowadays we can't do it. Maybe I don't have enough power in me to practice that. Maybe I go crazy when I meditate. So we have to overcome doubt. And this one is really quite tricky. There's no very clear-cut approach. And the one thing is very helpful is to know the teaching of the Buddha very well. And to really study the fundamental teaching and then observe in your own daily experience what you can already verify. So the Buddha talks about the psychic powers, the fourth jhana, and then you can remember your past lives. You may not be able to do that. So one good approach is certain things you put aside. You may not be sure, is that actually true? Can one really fly in a mind-made body, or can you see the mind of other beings and read that? So you may have doubts on that. But how are you going to resolve that? You don't have that Samadhi yet to check it out. So just put it aside, don't worry about it, and focus on the things you can already verify. For example, the Buddha said, good karma is synonymous with happiness. Good karma makes you happy. And this one we can try out. Grab some carrots, give some to our horses, or prepare some food, give it to the monks. Now do something good and check how it feels. And when you notice, that feels really good. And doing something good as a group, as friends, that feels even better. And then you have a direct verification in your own experience. And then you already trust the Buddha on generosity. This is a good approach, dealing with doubt. Now go with the things where you can actually check it out. And with the other one, you don't have to be totally convinced, doesn't matter. Leave it for later. Another one is kālyāna-miṭṭha, good friends. If you have all your friends all doubting, it's very difficult to get out of doubt. If you have all your friends very angry, very difficult to overcome anger. So this is another one that works very well for all of the hindrances. Unfortunately, usually we pick the people we like to hang out with according to our defilements. If you are a foodie kind of person who loves eating, you probably love hanging out with other people who love eating, isn't it? People who love gambling hang out with gamblers. People who love hunting and fishing hang out with hunters and fishers. People who are angry and grumpy and they like talking angrily with other angry and grumpy people. Lazy people are put off by very industrious people. They like to hang out with other lazy ones. So we have to change that. If you're lazy, hang out with people who are really energetic. If you are very sensual, and hang out with people who are very ascetic and frugal. If you are angry, and hang out with people who have lots of metta, like some of these great teachers, and so on. Now, not picking our friends according to defilements, but pick friends who have wholesome qualities, pick friends who have got wisdom, friends who have got calm and mindfulness and kindness and compassion. Friends who have no faith and conviction. Exactly. We associate according to elements, the element of our own defilements there, for sure. However, don't underestimate the strength of your good qualities. They may not have been activated yet, but as a human being, we all have the, could say, the seed, the potential for full awakening in us. So once you make some effort in that direction, and then it should be possible to find better people. Of course, we may not yet be able to identify the really good people, because to recognize a really good person, like an enlightened person, it takes another enlightened person. But anyway, it's a gradual process. At least you can maybe start cutting out the gangsters and the drug addicts and so on the coarser level. And as you progress over years and decades, you become much better in assessing other people and then associating with people who are really having very refined, noble and good qualities. Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Contemplating the danger of sensuality. How about music? Ask someone who has got tinnitus. Not tinnitus? It's not unusual to get that. It's these very loud sounds in your ears when you listen to very loud music. Now that is one thing you could apply because if we really like music, we often like listening very, very loud. And even with headphones, but even more so in clubs, you can induce that. I hope I don't get it when I get older, because I was a little bit indulgent in that in my late time. Otherwise, admittedly, if it's quite refined music and you listen at reasonable volume, I don't think there's any obvious danger like with food or something like that. So you have to contemplate the Ardhinava on a much more subtle level. And one thing is the impermanence. Because even if you listen to the most beautiful music and then you get this quite refined, beautiful mind state and uplifting emotion, you can't sustain that. And the moment you turn off the music, you're just back. Or even worse. And then you want to go back to that, but then it also starts losing the effect. In fact, if you keep 8 precepts for 10 days or something on a retreat, and then with a refined mind you go out and listen to some beautiful music, can be very powerful. On the other hand, if you listen all day, kind of wears off. So these are two things you can contemplate. The one, that it's wearing off, that it can't be sustained, that it's impermanent. And another one, it's dependency on something outside. That's one big difference between a meditation object given by the Buddha, which is something completely internal. Even if you repeat a sound, you're producing it, and you can later go silent. Whereas the music, you depend on going out through some senses into the external world. So from the perspective of deepening Samadhi, and you can possibly use music to bring you into a kind of meditative frame. And I think many people's mind states are often quite unwholesome, and if they listen to some refined, beautiful music, I think it's actually an improvement of their mind state. But if you want to carry that further towards Samadhi, it will not work, because Samadhi means that you have to bring the senses in, so to speak. You have to lose contact with the senses, and you have to stop this flowing out of consciousness of the mind through the sense doors. And music wouldn't support that. You remain in that position that you go out for gratification, that you go out to get pleasant feeling from something outside. And Samadhi is all about discovering an internal source of happiness. beautifully described in the simile for a second jhana, where the Buddha describes, imagine in the heat in the Indian hot season, but there's a lake. And that lake has got some source of water white at the bottom. There's a spring in the lake. So even in the hot season, that is fresh, clear, cool water. Now, this is the quality of Samadhi, that you have an internal happiness no longer dependent on the senses. And musicness still the opposite direction. But I agree, it's not so easy to see really the big danger in particular reasonable volume refined music. Yeah. And I think particularly in lay life, when you're on 5 precepts, I don't think it's wrong to sometimes use music to uplift your mind. Because you may well get in a better mind state there than what you had before. Just not to use it as the only means. Yeah. And even sometimes there's some beautiful kind of Dhamma music. On 5 precepts, and you can make use of that. Yeah, I agree. And another question about doubting. Usually you can't resolve it by thinking. And the more you think about your doubts, the worse they usually become. The thinking is usually increasing and sustaining the doubting. One thing, yes, you mentioned the quality of conviction, of confidence in the teaching of the Buddha. There's a beautiful Pali term called vimutta saddha, someone with the faith faculty released, to free that. Now, the Buddha is the supreme being in the universe. The Dhamma is the supreme teaching and the supreme state that can be attained in the universe, and the community of the enlightened disciple is the supreme community. And trying to free your faith. I love this idea that there's a quality already in our heart, but which is somehow restricted or obstructed, and being able to actually free that confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And the other thing is that ultimately the doubt has to be overcome by Samadhi. This is how Kanka, the monk who was the foremost doubter about all these little Vinaya rules, he was famous for that. He later became the top monk disciple in practicing Samadhi, jhana. That's the only way to go to a non-thinking state, where the mind is unified. Because what happens then is that so many of the doubting questions drop away. That is often the solution. It's not that you get an answer to the doubt, but the question just goes away. But you can't do that just with a thinking mind. Yeah, thanks for that comment. Yeah.
Just curious about using the doubt as a form of insight. So, for example, seeing that the doubt is there, knowing that I don't know anything about that, so let's look into it to understand it, and then the doubt falls away on its own through insight.
That is an interesting approach. No, that is for strong wisdom faculty. They do that in some Zen traditions. They talk about bringing up the big doubt and making the doubt so big that you're kind of getting forced to a breakthrough. So to really fully confronting the doubt and investigating it with wisdom, that can also be an approach. But it's usually for people with strong pañca. And maybe also you have to be, it has to be the more substantial doubts. If the mind is still too distracted, I think it will not work. But yeah, one can do that. Okay, I better let everyone go. If anyone has an urgent question, I'm still here. Anumodana for your patience. You were not very restless making it through this long talk.